English 102 students, this is a video that's going to be going over your first essay, which is the fiction essay. I'm going to go through the assignment and add some stuff to it as I read along. So it's a good idea to print out the assignment sheet and follow along as I am talking here. So let me get the assignment sheet in front of me. So now the due dates are up at the top. Introduction and thesis statement along with the outline, that's the first thing you turn in. So in essence, you're going to be turning in the first paragraph of your paper. You should have the thesis at the end of the paragraph, not at the beginning, and then your outline for the essay. I will put in an outline worksheet in with the assignment. You'll do a rough draft using Respondus Monitor. Now, with the rough draft, two things. First and foremost, I will copy and paste your text of the rough draft to the comments on the quiz, set up as a quiz. So you can use that to type your paper. Now, when you're typing your paper, you may only have the following with you as you're writing the rough draft: your introduction and outline, your source material, and your textbook, so you can look up stuff in the story if you need to. You can't have any pre-written drafts as you type the rough draft because this is a plagiarism deterrent. Let's make sure everybody's writing their own work. But it also has the big benefit of you get a draft in, you have something on the page, you get the paper started. You're going to have a much better paper if you do multiple drafts. Then the final draft will be due in Canvas. Remember that you can only use Word files, .doc or .docx, a PDF file, or an RTF file. So if you have a word processor, like if you have a Mac, you'll need to convert your file to a PDF. All right, so let's take a look at the assignment. We can approach analyzing fiction from a number of different angles. For example, a quick JSTOR.org, and this is a database like Academic Search Premier. For Rose for Emily by William Faulkner, or How I Met My Husband by Alice Munro, results in over 1,000 essays and articles for each story, meaning that there's a lot of different ways that we can approach a work of literature. With this in mind, select one of the topics below from the textbook and write a 4 to 6 page essay, and that's a minimum of 1,200 words, and I go by word count, not page length, where you explore the theme or idea from your selected essay prompt. Your essay should have a clearly stated thesis and support that thesis with solid evidence. Now, the definition of solid evidence is going to be specific evidence from the text, like quotes talking about specific scenes, characters, scenery, setting, point of view, all that stuff. And support that thesis with solid evidence. Solid evidence is going to be specific evidence from the text or secondary source material. Secondary source material is stuff that talks about the work or talks about an issue of significance about the work. In addition, make sure you include literary terms as part of your vocabulary in this essay. Yes, we do take quizzes on literary terms, but just identifying them is not really something we're going to be doing in this essay. They are a vocabulary for talking about literature. Just like every industry, like if you're a mechanic and you work on cars, or you're an airline pilot, or you're a truck driver, there's certain words that you use just in those industries. Make sure that you're using things like image and metaphor, simile, character, point of view. All these things are stuff that you're going to talk about as part of your essay, but they should be part of your vocabulary and not just simply identifying that they exist in a story. You need to tell us how the author uses those things, not just that they're there. All right, what to write about? If my screen would let me scroll down, there we go. The first thing you should do in composing this essay is to read through all the prompts below and select one or two that might work for you. After, brainstorm ideas on the prompt or prompts you're interested in. You may need to brainstorm ideas on multiple prompts to decide which one you think is going to work best for you for this paper. If you see one that is the only one you want to work on from the beginning, that's fine too. So you can narrow it down to just one topic and one story to write on. The prompts you can select from are the following. All of these are suggestions for writing. So number 2 on page 93, 1 through 3 on 141, number 2 on 191, number 1 on 285, number 1 on 329, 1 or 2 on 364, number 2 on 387. And because you have so many choices here, I'm not going to allow you to do your own topic. So you need to find one of these that works for you and write on it. Okay, so continuing on with the assignment sheet. Once you brainstorm, narrow your focus to one story and one prompt. You can then work to organize your ideas in a way that makes sense to both you and your audience. Now, for all of the papers in this class, when I ask students in a brick and mortar class, I say, who's your audience for the paper? Everybody always answers, well, it's you. It's the teacher. You're going to be grading it. But I do grade your papers with an imagined audience in mind. And that is other college students. So, 18 to whatever year old college students. And your audience for this paper and all your papers in this class, you're assuming that your audience has already read the story. And your job is to give it more depth or to analyze a story that somebody's already read. So you're speaking or writing to an audience of your peers who have already read the story. So moving on. If you are comfortable, use the 5-paragraph essay format in this essay in the drafting process. And I have that underlined on purpose. But since you will likely have more to say, your essay can exceed 5 paragraphs. In essence, you can have more than 3 body paragraphs if necessary. In college writing, we start to move past the 5-paragraph essay. We move to more of a format of, we have an introduction, a body that proves the thesis, and the conclusion. That body that proves the thesis is going to be as long as it needs to be to prove the ideas you're trying to argue. So a basic but very limited outline might look like this. And your introduction talks about your topic, which one you selected, and has a thesis near the end of the paragraph. For those of you that are used to putting the thesis at the beginning of the paragraph, here's why you put it at the end. The purpose of a thesis is to provide focus for the essay. In order to have the most effect with that focus, the reader has to have an idea of what you're going to discuss. So they need to know, like, for example, with this paper, what story are they talking about? What are some interesting things about that story? And then you focus your ideas at the end of the introduction once the reader has an idea of what you're going to discuss in the paper. Okay, so you might describe your topic or you might launch into analysis in the first body paragraph. That's kind of up to you. Then paragraph 3 is a body paragraph proving your thesis with specific examples. Paragraph 4 is either the second or third paragraph that is proving your thesis. And then you add as many additional paragraphs as you need to be successful. And then paragraph 5 is a thorough conclusion. And by that, conclusion for this paper, it's going to be 5 to 8 sentences. Don't just slap a conclusion onto your paper, because this is your last opportunity to prove your points to the reader. Okay, so in addition to your own analysis of the work, you must use at least 3 secondary sources that you incorporate into your argument. Now, the primary source, which is the story that comes out of your textbook, and this, when you're looking up how to cite this, cite it as a work from an anthology. Let's see. Greg Johnson and Thomas Arp didn't write any of the stories in this book. So whatever story you choose, make sure you're starting the citation with the author and then cite it as a work in an anthology. The primary source does not count in this number, but you must cite it on your Works Cited page. So in other words, you'll have at least 4 entries on your Works Cited page. primary source, textbook, and 3 secondary sources. Now, make sure you're following the approved research material policy, which you can find in the syllabus. But it basically boils down to a .edu, a .gov, or something that comes from one of the library databases like the Literary Reference Center, EBSCO, Academic Search Premier. You can use those without permission. But most other sites, you need to get my permission to use them on a paper. So make sure you read that policy and follow it on all of our papers. Okay, so the 4 sources, primary source, 3 secondary sources. On to page 2 now. These sources must be viable, legitimate academic sources. I just talked about that a little bit. Now, I see a lot of students using the dictionary as kind of a cop-out source. This will add to my minimum number of sources. Now, you can use the dictionary in your paper, but it's not going to count toward those minimum number of sources, and that goes for any paper in the class. Remember to use MLA documentation when documenting your sources. I have some resources down a little farther to help you out. Make sure you're following the approved research material policy, and at all costs, avoid writing a plot summary of the text. This isn't a book report, this is an analysis, okay? And the first 50 pages or so of the textbook talk about that at length, and the introduction to the chapters in the textbook also talk about how we analyze text. And I'm going to do what I can to get you guys a sample essay to see if that'll help visualize the paper. Okay, so in terms of formatting, I mean for this to kind of be a checklist before you turn the paper in, you'll need to have a good title. It needs to be at least 1,200 words long. Now go back to the syllabus and look at the revision requirements. If you want to revise your essay, this essay needs to be at least 90% of the minimum word count. So you can revise as long as you have 1,080 words or more. In addition, remember that the works cited page doesn't count in the word count. Okay, so you need to have your essay in Times New Roman 12-point font. Follow MLA formatting guidelines. I'm also going to have a PowerPoint video posted in the modules tab, but there's a link here that will be very helpful. Have page numbers and your last name in the upper right corner of every page. So for example, if you look at the pages on this assignment, they say Willis 1, Willis 2. That's what they're supposed to look like. You need to have a thesis that answers the so what question. Refer to the thesis statement PowerPoint if you don't know what that means. You need to use good detail and evidence from your short story or your secondary sources to prove your thesis. If you need a definition of a secondary source, if you're kind of confused, I have a link there. It needs to be well organized, free of grammatical and mechanical errors, and language appropriate to an academic essay. All the essays in this class need to be written in the third person. He, she, it, they, their. You especially need to avoid the second person, you, your, y'all. But I also really don't want you to write in the first person either. I think, I believe, I feel, right in the third person, okay? And if you have questions about that or you're confused by that at all, shoot me an email. I'll be happy to give you some resources on how you write in the third person as opposed to the first person. And I have a note here, use the rubric below as a final editing tool. It's how you're going to be graded, so make sure your essay follows those guidelines. Before you submit that essay, I would take a look at the rubric and say, okay, does my essay do this? Does it do this? I'm scrolling down to page 3. Does my introduction introduce the paper well? Do I have a good thesis? Are my paragraphs solid? Is the paper well organized? Do I have good content? Are my citations on the up and up? Have I avoided the second person? Have I written my essay in the third person? Have I made it as grammatically sound as possible? Go through the rubric and really test your essay to see if it holds up. Okay, so that's all I have to say on this first essay. Of course, if you have any questions, let me know. If I talk too fast, it's a good video. A good thing it's a video because you can go back and review my notes. So if you would please let me know if you have any questions about this paper. I'd be happy to answer them. And good luck. I hope you find a story that works for you and that you like writing about.